And that's when she said, "Did you bring the horse?" Hey, we're on.
Oh my gosh.
Kent, we start paying attention.
Sorry.
Hey, I'm Jeff DeVerter.
I'm Ken Kingery.
And we are the Cloudists, here to share, well, really just the conversation we'd have whether you're here or not. In fact, we already were having. That's why you heard us while telling jokes.
That's right.
Right, because we like to talk about the cloud stuff.
Absolutely.
Kent, what does the Cloudist mean to you?
What does a Cloudist mean to me? We're just here to help, Jeff.
We are just here to help.
Just here to help.
Funny you should say that, because we're still trying to figure out our logo.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought we had a logo already.
No, we don't. No, we're working on it.
Okay.
Good friend folks over at 99 Designs have been helping us out.
Okay.
By that we mean we paid them.
Okay.
And so we got a little poll going to help us figure out what this online identity should be.
Yep.
Now, while we are, we have our opinions, we think we know what we like. I would like to think that maybe our listener, because I think there's only one, might want to have some.
It's Mom.
Well, we have two then.
Okay, all right. It's your mom too, right? So there we go.
May want to actually contribute to this. So, maybe that stunning producer, Drew, would bring them up. We can take a little look at the current ones. We are going to put in the show notes for this the link to the poll so that you too can vote on what our logo should be. Yep. We need an online identity. I have a favorite.
We have narrowed this down, though, in all seriousness, from thousands. I mean, there were thousands, hundreds, literally tens of designers that wanted to design a logo.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing how when you decide to pay somebody to do something, how they
come out of the woodwork.
Absolutely.
It's kind of nuts.
Yeah.
So we're still trying to figure that out. We know who we are. We're the Cloudists.
Yep.
We know what we're trying to do. Help you with some cloud stuff.
Yep.
Just kind of join you into the conversation of what does it mean to move to the cloud. These are conversations that we have with our customers on a daily basis. Yep. And pre-customers. So we'd love to, just glad that you're here. We want to help. Tagline. That's a tagline. And with that, why don't we jump into today's show?
Got it.
Cool. As always, we are doing the usual stuff. We are going to start with some, tidbits of information, banter for a bit. We're going to talk about some news things that we have seen out on the interwebs that we think are impactful as it relates to cloud. Generally speaking, they're going to be more centric in and around the Azure space, but not holistically in the Azure space. Yep. In fact, all today's show is about Azure. So yes, it's all about Azure today. And sometimes we have a guest in here that joins in the colorful banter.
Yeah.
And then
badinage,
yes. And maybe a bit slinger or two will join.
Yeah, maybe so.
And I want to thank Todd again for last week. Good stuff. And then we'll dig into the meat of the matter. We're going to learn something today. The intent is to have Kent tell us his top 10.5 favorite aspects or most important things you need to know about the Azure Portal.
Yep.
He's going to get into this, but we don't. There's a lot there. We can't demo them all. So what we're going to do is provide links and information about all of this later in the show notes, and then future shows we're going to dig deep.
Probably have some dig deep. Yep.
We'll dig deep. All right, with that, let's go to the news. Run this segment. All right, now to the news. So one of the things I thought was kind of interesting, and this isn't just around, what's the latest new feature, but what are some of the resources that are available to you out on the internet for Azure? And one of those is a new Channel 9 video all about, and really it's a part 2. It was back in November-ish, I think, that those guys had on one of the SQL leads for Azure. And so in this most recent episode, they're talking about some of the cool things that can happen with SQL IaaS in Azure.
SQL IaaS, is that still a thing?
It's still a thing. It's still important to, at some point, for specific reasons. And Kent, what are the reasons why somebody would still want to run an infrastructure as a service, a VM, to run SQL as opposed to just, SQL Azure?
Well, so here's a
Azure
big reason. If there are features in SQL Server that haven't made it to the PaaS version of Azure SQL, the job manager, for example, or being able to put native CLR code in the database engine itself, those things are currently not in the PaaS layer. So those are two really good reasons.
Excellent reasons. Or maybe more resources that or at least confined resources.
Absolutely.
At any rate, in this latest Channel 9 video, and the link will be provided in the show notes down there. Don't go looking for it now. Stick here with us for a little bit. You're going to find some pretty cool information. So what are all the SQL images that are available inside of the marketplace? But it's also going to include some information and show some demos, tons of demos in this video about running SQL for Linux, actually running on RHEL, Red Hat Enterprise Linux.
SQL for Linux?
Yeah.
What?
It's a thing. It's a thing.
Wow.
Yeah. We go sprinkle some rock salt over where hell froze over.
Yeah.
But Microsoft loves some open source now. The latest statistic that I heard as far as the amount of open source running in Azure, a third of Azure runs an open source workload.
Wow. I mean, most of my stuff that's in Azure today is open source.
And by the end of the next fiscal year for Microsoft, which is our next July or next June, July, they expect over half of Azure will be running an open source workload.
That's amazing.
So it goes to your point. Was it last week? Or no, it was last week. It wasn't your point, but it was Todd made the point that you remember that guy back in the 90s who made a bunch of money by installing Linux.
Yep.
Yeah, now it's available en masse inside of the Azure space.
At the push of a button.
At the push of a button.
Yep.
So there's also some good information in this video about bring your own licensing for doing that, how to actually do that, choosing the right images for that. And then another interesting feature is a sensitivity setting, basically. I think I've made that term up, that will automatically shut down your image to save money. Based on schedule, based on use. It's obviously not something you want to just automatically disappear in the middle of a workload. Get in there, play around, watch this video, but you can actually, from a scheduled perspective, kill those VMs. So we have a customer that it's running some dev test environments, and in these environments, they don't work a whole lot after 5, and they don't work a whole lot on the weekend. Right. So you've written some interesting code to automatically deprovision and reprovision, dehydrate and rehydrate, I think is the phrase you've used, and I like. But this is a way to do that on a VM by VM perspective, which is kind of cool. Yeah. So also in the news, I thought I was being really clever by finding this one, but you said, "Oh, Gamasutra, there's a website that I've trolled for a long time." In fact,
I told you I've lost many years of my life.
So your wife says, but they did a whole blog post, and it's a really cool post on how to create an online game running in Azure. So what are all of the resources that are needed there? And they've got some really interesting information there. It includes all of the scripts, all the PowerShell, links to all the executables that you'll need, links to even downloading Visual Studio, because of course you need that to create the guts of what you're going to do. They've got a proposed architecture there from front end, middleware, back end database type stuff, how to configure it all for scaling. Because as you know, in an online environment, you've got to think through, what are my max potentials, and then how do you account for more? So,
then how do you deal with the afternoon, at 4:30 when all the kids get home from school?
Exactly.
All the guys get home from work and want to jump on and play.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious to know, in this article, do they go through and talk about some of the advances that Microsoft is making in things like GPUs available in Azure?
They touch on it a little bit there.
There's some cool
this is more, and I think it's even a part 1, but it's more 101. What are the pieces that I need? How do I create the infrastructure? How do I manage the infrastructure to do that? So,
it seems to be a tailor-made case for the cloud.
You would think, yeah. So, check the show notes again for that blog article, and leave yourself 30 minutes, 60 minutes to get in and look at it. It's going to taunt you to go download some of this stuff so that you get in and start playing with it. So leave yourself a little extra time, but a great article. Also, if you're into gaming as an industry, there's some really interesting stuff there from a business perspective, from a design perspective. Plug the Gamasutra website for a second, since you have obviously lost a few.
So it is now kind of become the place where game developers and game technicians and designers hang out. I mean, it's usually a source clearinghouse for all the market news. And what I was going to say was, one of the reasons that I'm on it, and I love gaming, right? But one of the reasons I'm on it is that, quite frankly, as the gaming industry goes, the corporate application industry goes. I mean, think about the UI advances that are in apps and things like that are coming straight out of the game market, right?
Excellent point.
So some good stuff to be learned, even if you're not a game developer.
Right. So another interesting thing is if you've been following the cloud world for any amount of time, you realize that there is a certain class of people that tend to disrupt somebody's interest in innovating in the cloud, and that is what we call a patent troll.
A troll. Don't just live under bridges and hassle goats. No. So
Microsoft is super interested in helping ensure that they're lowering the barriers to you being afraid of actually innovating inside of Azure, using Azure as an innovative platform, knowing that it's out there, knowing that it's available, knowing that at some degree that does expose you to these trolls. Or a term that I learned in reading this next bit is NPE, or non-practicing entity, the legal term for a patent troll. Basically, they hold a patent in something, but they don't actually do it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So
Never
it's a
heard that
lawyer
term.
somewhere, maybe in California, maybe somewhere else. I don't know where they are. I don't mean to disparage California today. But, as a lawyer, how are they going to know about optimizing for, some aspect of what somebody's trying to do in the cloud? They're not. They just had an idea. They bought an idea. They filed a patent. They wait for somebody to actually innovate there, and then they go sue their pants off. So that leaves that innovator who tends to maybe not necessarily have the deepest pockets in the world at risk. In fact, over the past, this article goes on to say, there's a blog article over at Microsoft that states that over the past 5 years, these lawsuits, these patent infringement lawsuits from NPE, non-practicing entities, has increased 22%. And of those suits, 35% of those caused damage to go back to that innovator.
Okay.
Yeah, it stinks. So what Microsoft has done is put their money where their mouth is, and that is they have taken and put their 10,000 patents up and available for innovators to actually leverage. And anything that they file patents for and are awarded in the future are able to be used as well. So that innovator has the breadth of Microsoft IP kind of standing behind
it.
it.
Pass-through protection from the Microsoft patent catalog. So if Microsoft has a patent on something and some troll comes along and says, hey, you're infringing on my patent, Microsoft basically says, no, we had it. We've got the patent on it, prior art kind of a thing, and we'll protect it.
It's us.
Okay.
So this program has a name. It's the Microsoft Azure IP Advantage. Show notes, you're going to find a link to their announcement article. There's also a nifty little video so that your mom can watch and understand what they're talking about. So that's my 3 little bits of news. We got some interesting Channel 9 video on SQL IaaS running up in Azure. We got information about how to program a game utilizing Azure as the backend. And then lastly, the Microsoft Azure IP Advantage. I want to keep reading it in case I get sued by somebody.
I like it.
Cool.
I like it. Good
All
news.
right. So that's what's going on in the world of news in the Azure Microsoft world.
Fantastic.
So there's that. But with that, it takes us to my favorite part of the segments, and that is let's help. How do we help? Through demonstration, through education.
Right.
And
we did a lot of demonstrating today, but basically what we did is we sat down and we said, hey, we should look at the Azure Portal, and we should think about sort of the top 10 things that we might find interesting about the Azure Portal, things that you might not know are there necessarily, things that you might want to look at or take care of inside the portal. And where it's appropriate, we'll talk about how you can do that also on PowerShell. But today we're really focused on the portal. Right. Because I guarantee I get in the portal, and a lot of times I'm looking through things and I go, oh, I didn't know you could do that in the portal. In fact, just today, preparing the final bit of this, I looked and I went, oh, well, there's a feature right there. So, and you challenged me that 10 wasn't quite enough. We're not ready to go to 11 yet. No. Not that good, but we're going to go to 10 and a half.
Good for 10 and a half. So you're going to get 10 and a half today. That's a half better than you would have gotten.
That's true. That's true. So, all right. So the number one, see your subscriptions and the summary of your spend.
Now we've taken all of these. This is our second. These segments and said, we've kind of taken this mindset of we're going to help somebody as they start to think about moving into the cloud. So beginning steps moving forward. You've just used a term I want to make sure everybody understands. Subscription. So I have an account in Azure. Why do I need a subscription?
So your account in Azure really is managing subscriptions. So subscription is a way of sort of logically delineating, the things that you have. So you might have a subscription for your developers. You might have a subscription for your production. You might have a subscription for, staging or something else, or research or whatever it is. And the subscriptions basically separate your resources at a much broader level. A subscription is sort of like if you've used some of the other cloud providers, like AWS, for example, they call it an account. Right? You call it an account. You're thinking the Microsoft Live account or the Microsoft Azure account. You can have multiple subscriptions that you manage. So that's what a subscription is, and you pay for it on a per time basis. That's the utility model of Azure. So,
all right. So it's a container to hold resources. Those resources cost money. And you mentioned, first of all, how do you see and manage your subscriptions, but also the attached spend, because spend is attached to a subscription.
Well, and this is kind of a handy little thing. You literally go and look at your subscriptions in the dashboard, and what you get is a list of those subscriptions and the current spend within the billing period.
Right.
So one of the things that we always have people asking us, and I ask myself when I look at my own subscriptions, is how much have I spent so far? That information didn't used to be easily available. It used to be little tiles and things that were hard to get to. Now it's literally, here's my subscription list. Here's dev, here's test, here's staging, here's production, and here's our current spend spend. And on top of that, if you click into it a little bit, they even project that at your current usage rate, here's what your end of the billing period spend is going to look like.
Super useful.
Super useful.
So number one, how to see, manage your subscriptions and also see what your spend is.
Yep.
Cool.
Now, number two, we were talking about resources and separating the resources out. There is this idea of resource groups. Now, resource groups are not new. They've been in Azure now since Azure has brought the sort of V2 or resource manager version. But what it is it's essentially a grouping mechanism that allows you to basically group things together. So let's say you have 10 VMs and you have a virtual network that comprise one system. You can put all of those in a resource group, and then you can apply security to the resource group. You can use your access control list. You can use your role-based access control to keep people from doing things inside the resource group, et cetera. You get billing on the detail from Microsoft broken down by the resource group. So within a subscription in dev test, maybe you have dev test team A and B and C. Each of them has their own resource group. And then you can see the billing and the summary of the resources they're using. Plus you can delete resources as a group. You can spin resources up as a group, et cetera.
Excellent.
So using resource groups.
So first was subscriptions, then we're on to resource groups. All right, heading down the list to number three.
Number three, we're still talking about resources, and we were just talking about SQL Server on a VM. But there is this idea of building Azure SQL databases in a PaaS-like environment, right? Essentially without having to worry about the VM running, right? So you can do this right in Azure SQL. And last show, we talked about the fact that the query editor was available in the portal. So you can really create and operate and do all the things that you want to do with your database within the portal now without ever having to go to SQL Server Management Studio, et cetera.
Okay, so I asked you earlier, what was a good example of why I would want to run SQL in a virtual machine? What's the reason I want to run SQL PaaS?
So running SQL PaaS can be a less costly alternative. It allows you to scale infinitely better, right? And if you don't need those features, all that overhead of the job scheduler and things of that nature, then it makes a great possibility for you because they can be spun up, spun down, created, destroyed, et cetera, very, very easily.
So then to use the example, if we go back to the news article on creating an online game or an online game utilizing Azure, and in the back end of that is a database to manage state, to manage scores, to manage all of that sort of stuff. SQL PaaS may be a great solution for that because we don't necessarily know how many people can come in and use this. We want it to be billions, mind you, because there's going to be ideally dollars associated with that, and we don't necessarily want to think about how that machine on the back end has to handle that load. SQL PaaS is just going to take it, unless of course you need something unique. All right, there's number three.
All right, so the fourth one, let's delve a little bit into a thing we talked at length with Todd last week about, which is identity, right? And the whole idea of Azure Active Directory. So lots and lots and lots of Windows-based organizations use Active Directory for their identity, and Azure has this thing called Azure Active Directory. You can create and manage your users, your groups, your security, all that kind of stuff right within the Azure portal. You don't have to go anywhere. You literally log in. You can create a new user. You can list users. You can put permissions in, all of those kind of things. Now, we're not going to dig any deeper into Azure AD because, frankly, you and I both know we got a guy that works for us right now, works with us, that is way smarter about AD. We'll get him on at some point. But the point is that this is available in the portal. You don't have to go anywhere else. It's right there in the portal.
Very cool. And to be clear, that's not running on IaaS that we have to manage. It's not running on a virtual machine we have to manage. It is a platform as a service.
Absolutely.
So ideally, an infinite amount of users can get in and authenticate to that without having to think about it, unless, of course, you're trying to log in and register for the Build conference, which failed yesterday for 45 minutes.
Because apparently you have an Azure AD issue.
Maybe. Who knows?
Maybe we don't know.
Not pointing fingers.
So we're not. Okay. So
see what I did there?
So that's Azure
I
AD.
vented.
And I'm telling you that there is so much more to talk about in Azure AD, and we will get to that in future episodes.
Yeah, there's so many use cases. We're gonna bore you to tears. I mean, delight you with Azure AD information. All right, let's move on. We've got a lot to cover.
So we've talked about some administrative things up to this point. We've talked about the administration. We've talked about the resources. Let's talk about the idea of billing, because look, everybody who comes to the cloud wants to know how much is it going to cost. And the example that I usually typically use is the very first time that I gave my kid texting on her phone, right? And this was before the days of unlimited texting. I got a bill at the end of the month. It's like $600+ on texting. I didn't know somebody could text that much.
Oh, it's true.
17,000 messages or whatever it was. And so companies want to be able to look at their billing. They want to be able to control their billing. They want to be able to do bill back. They want to be able to do all this kind of things, and analytics on the billing, et cetera. So the Azure Portal gives you the ability to go in and look at your billing and look at your spend that you've done. In addition to the summary we talked about earlier, this is incredibly detailed information. You can go in and see a resource group and drill into the resource group and literally see the per resource cost. Here's a NIC inside a VM. You can literally see how much that NIC is costing you every time the thing is running.
That's great.
So,
and you can tag all that information so that ideally, if you're doing chargebacks, that sort of thing, you can use unique tags. You can do it by department, by application, by whatever metrics you or your business need.
And on the billing summary now, those tags show up inside the billing list, so you can actually search and list on those tags. I mean, it's really powerful. So it keeps you from having to export all the data out to an Excel spreadsheet, run a bunch of queries just to get a simple answer for your boss on a Friday who wants to know, hey, why in the world is development group B running a $5,000 a month?
Can you easily export that or connect that into Power BI to look at that over time?
You bet. Absolutely. It can be flooded right
Power
into
BI, future episode.
So, absolutely.
Future 20 episodes.
So number six. Let's talk about secrets.
Ooh, I like secrets.
Do you like secrets?
Yeah, I can't keep them very well.
Two people can keep a secret if one of them is dead. That's what I've always heard.
Exactly.
So Azure gives you the ability through a thing called the Azure Key Vault to manage secrets and keys. There's actually a great podcast from Software Engineering Daily, I think, or .NET Rocks. One of the two. We'll put a link in the show notes. One of the product managers of the Azure Key Vault. And basically, this is a place for you to put secret information that you don't want shared anywhere else, but that your applications can get to. And more importantly, your applications can get to this information without them having to know what it is. So let's say you have a
use case.
Secret key, right? I have a bunch of keys that I manage as Acme Corporation, right? I hire you as a developer, a third-party developer, to write me an application. You can write to access my key vault, but not have access to the keys.
So the content that's there.
Exactly
That's really cool.
Or an employee, right? That doesn't stay around, and you want to be able to get rid of that. All handled through some things like
offshore developers.
Absolutely. And so this is incredibly important. I can tell you myself, having been the victim of putting secret information in source code and getting it into GitHub, et cetera. This is an incredibly handy feature, and it can be managed right in the portal.
Very cool. So keeping secrets, Portal does it all for you. Accessible via, of course, by PowerShell for those guys in the code.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So keeping in our sort of development theme, let's talk about Dev and Test Labs. So there's a feature in Azure called Dev Test Labs. And basically it is a management function, if you will, sort of a construct around all the resources that you would use to do development and testing. So you can build this Dev Test Lab. You can add resources to it. You can pick from an available set of VMs, for example, and say these VMs belong to this lab. And it is sort of like having a resource group for dev and test, but on steroids, right? So all of the things you can get around reporting and around the management of it and managing access to it, et cetera, you can do all of that from within the portal as well. And the Dev Test Lab is a feature that I definitely want us to go into in a later episode into detail, because I know that a lot of folks that use Azure and use the public cloud in general are doing so for development and testing. Even if they're running your applications internally, sometimes they use it because it's just simpler, right? As a developer, you can spin up a lab, you can get the resources that you want, do the work you need, do the testing that you need, get rid of it when you're done.
Kill it. And you can be prescriptive about what those images are, what those solutions are, so that you can help ensure that all your thousands of developers or tens of developers are all using the same base images.
Right. So that we're not hearing, well, it worked on my machine.
May never be said again.
Right. One of my favorites. All right. Number 8. We're going to jump a little bit. One of the things that we have heard, obviously in working with our customers with Azure and with other clouds, is how do I get my stuff into the cloud? I mean, I've got this this footprint,
Yeah.
either on my own premise or in, Rackspace's dedicated hosting or whatever. I've got all this data that I need to move, or VMs or whatever they are.
Sure.
So Azure has had for a long time this idea of the import-export service, right?
Okay.
And the way that you manage that is through a job. So let's say that you've got 20 terabytes of data you want to move to the South Central Azure region, which is right down the road from us, right down here near SeaWorld, right?
Yeah.
What you do is you basically go in and create a job. It will give you information like shipping information and codes and keys and all sorts of stuff. You go take your data, you download it, offload it onto a USB sort of storage device, and you send it to the region.
Yeah.
They then pop the job up on their end. They import the data into the thing you told them to put it in, whatever storage account it needs to go in, et cetera.
Yeah.
And you can see the status of the job. You can manage the approach of the job. You can manage the security around the job, all from right inside the portal. Pretty dang impressive.
Got to be easy to get your data in, because ultimately it doesn't matter how cool your application is if it doesn't have access to the data that makes it work. Doesn't do you any good.
Well, and that's generally the hardest thing, I think, about migrating an app. It's usually not the application itself. It's all the ton of data that you've built up over the years.
And it goes towards, one of the topics of our future episodes, and that is, do I migrate or do I transform? In a lift and shift migrate perspective, you need to pick that data up in whatever form it is, and it's got to get trucked over to Azure in some way. And what that ultimately is going to mean is not sending it across a wire, generally speaking. It means it's putting on some form of physical media and then going through the process to get it at the loading dock and get it plugged into something and import it.
Yep.
All right, future work, but you do all that through the portal.
Number 8. Number 9. So we've mentioned, I think, a few times, and maybe we've even had a show about it or a webinar about it, about the idea of the automation side of Azure and how we use templates to be able to define what an environment looks like, software-defined networking, software-defined computing. And so Azure has this thing called Azure Resource Manager Templates. ARM is what you hear, not to be confused with the processor. It's ARM, Azure Resource Manager. And the template defines a resource or a set of resources, maybe a VM or a set of VMs and a network and a database or whatever they happen to be. Well, now inside Azure, what you can do is you can basically upload your templates. You can have a whole catalog of them inside the portal, and you can pick a template and deploy, right? Now, some months ago, maybe a year ago or more, I had actually written a customized portal for one of our customers to do this very thing. There are still advantages to the custom approach, right? Because I have some things in that portal that don't exist in the Azure portal. But for the day-to-day use of somebody who needs to be able to say, hey, Jeff, you have access to these 10 templates to deploy. And those templates have machine sizes built into them, that's the only thing you can pick. They have resource groups built into them, that's the only ones you can pick. Very, very handy capability. You can put a description on there. You can name the template. You upload the template, and you can actually edit the template right in the storage device as well.
So this reminds me of something I forgot to mention on the SQL piece. So in order to create these templates, you need configuration files for all these different images of things, right? So one of the things that they go into in that channel 9 video, and then you understand, is how do you actually go out and download from Azure the configuration that you create for an individual infrastructure as a service type thing, or even the configuration pieces for how you've got platform set up. So it will allow you to download that and then add it to your own templates there.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. In fact, a lot of the resources now, if you look in the Azure portal, as you're building a resource, you'll see down at the bottom, there's usually a little link that says, hey, how do you automate this? Or show me the config for it. And it actually is the ARM template. So once you've built it out, you can download the template and use it to your heart's content. And put it up in this template.
So click into the WYSIWYG, make it the way you want it to be, make it behave, test it, beat it up, and then download the template so it's stampable and repeatable.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yay, ARM.
So number 10. So
we're getting close.
Yeah, we are. We're getting close. So number 10 is an interesting one. We've touched on it before when we talked about serverless computing. We talked about the idea of Azure Functions. So one of the things that is available now in the portal is this idea of the Azure Functions. And not only can you create an Azure function, like you can create a web app and you can upload the app, you can actually create the function and code it right in the portal. So you can literally open an editor and write C# code or write Node.js code or write whatever you want right there in the portal and build the Azure function right there. You can test it, you can run it, you can pause it, you can stop it, you can monitor, all right in the portal. So now you don't even need a copy of Visual Studio to build this stuff. I mean,
don't they make money on Studio?
They do,
Yeah.
But when they really make money, they want you to be using Azure functions.
Yeah, they don't want to sell
You know?
tools. They want to sell this cloud
They
capability.
want to spin that meter.
Yeah.
So, right? And that's one way to do it. Plus, it's a huge advantage to you if you have a ton of people, or let's say you hire one individual to go build you a function,
Sure.
or even a business user who has figured out a little Node.js or
Sure.
figured out a little C#. They can go in and they can write, or PowerShell. They can actually go in and write this right in the portal and put it in place and give you to you and say, look, here's the function you call.
Access it. Yep. Yeah. Talk about being able, we have this debate so often, it seems, for the past 10 and a half years, it's about microservices. Is it about, service-oriented architecture? And this is just a way to get away from having to use big fat tools and fancy server configurations to a text editor in a browser running inside of Azure.
You bet.
All right.
Yep.
Those are the 10. I wonder what the last half one is. It's going to be a pretty tasty nugget, I would have to think.
The half one, let's just recap real quick, right? Number one, see your subscriptions and your spend summary. Right. Number two, be able to use resource groups to manage your resources. Number three, create and manage your Azure SQL databases. Number four, manage your Azure Active Directory and all the things that entails. Number five, get detailed billing information about your subscription. Number six, in case you're keeping track at home, create and manage secrets and keys with the Key Vault. Number seven, create and manage dev test labs, which is really, really cool. Number eight, manage the import and export jobs. Number nine, create and manage Azure Resource Manager, or ARM templates. And number 10 was create and manage Azure functions.
If this were a more high budget thing, we'd have had a fancy graphic there.
We would. Or we'd have the guy like Letterman had standing over, the top 10.
Oh, yeah. You could be throwing cards.
I could.
After everyone.
I could, absolutely.
Awesome.
All right, so let's go to the half.
Here comes.
Half is right here.
This is why you tuned in today.
This little half right here. I don't know if Drew can pick that up right here. This little half.
All right.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so you and I have talked about many, many times, wouldn't it be great if there was a thing that could sort of look at our Azure environment, look at our subscription, look at our resources, and make recommendations about what to do, how to improve, maybe a way to optimize, or maybe make some changes to security or whatever.
Only we had an advisor. Such an advisor as that.
So here's the half one, and it's way bigger than a half. Inside the portal is a thing called,
wait for it,
catchily termed the Azure Advisor.
Where's the mic? We got to drop a mic, which our producer Drew
because Drew would get mad. But the Azure Advisor gives you the ability to go in and on a subscription be able to get recommendations about what to do. I actually ran this on one of my subscriptions and got back a lot of very valuable information about some VMs that I had running and about the way I had my networking set up. And I suspect that over time this thing is going to get better and better and better. Surely behind the covers there's some machine learning things going on. I'm sure there's a ton of it. And so right now it's in preview, but it's a very, very powerful thing. You can literally go to the portal, do a search for Azure Advisor, pop it right up and run it, and it'll immediately start to give you information.
What am I getting? Am I getting things about network configuration, server health,
sizing, that sort of thing? I haven't drilled.
You bought a big gargantuan server and you're not making the processor move.
You got one of those G series, which we know stands for Godzilla. It's that kind of thing. And they're going to give you that advice because, frankly, that's what a lot of people want. They want that advice and counsel on the journey to the cloud. And once they get to the cloud, to make sure that the things that they're doing within the cloud make sense and that they're utilizing the resources. I fully expect that at some point in the future, it may actually go, hey, you know what? We noticed you're running SQL Server on a VM over here, but you're really not using any of the fancy features. What if you did this over here in the PaaS version of Azure SQL database, right? And so we will jump into this in detail in a future episode because this is a key piece that our customers have been looking for a long time. And frankly, we want as well.
Exactly. So. And, it gets back to you really need to challenge your providers or whoever you're looking to help you with Azure, whether it's people that you are employing directly with your company or service companies like Rackspace, service providers. So, more and more of what we've been doing in technology over the past forever years has been around, server deployment, server patching, server health. Well, more and more that's happening at the at the cloud level. They're taking care of those things. So make sure that you're getting additional increasing value from the folks who are managing this stuff from you, because there's still great value in having them there, because they know your business better than any cloud can know your business. So what you want to make sure you're doing, this is my little half of whatever, is to help make sure that the value they're providing is as business specific from an IT perspective in pushing your business forward.
Well, and that the elimination of sort of the mundane, and sort of pedestrian things that we do. I mean, you mentioned it yourself, right? The whole idea of managing security groups on a network, or managing, your VM and your sizing and all of that. So much of that has now been automated, or is capable of being automated. You can free your folks up to go innovate.
Yeah.
Because as you said, they're the ones that generally know your business as well as anybody inside your organization.
Even if it means it's a real life human still who's looking at the output of the machine learning.
Absolutely.
To make a business decision. It may say, hey, you've got this big G series machine, but you're barely making it tick. Well, you know that you've done that because tomorrow the big ad is going to drop that's going to drive business through the roof, and you guys haven't had a chance yet to have a horizontally scaling application. Right. So there may be good reasons for it that are business specific that a machine's not going to know, but you need to have a person looking at that data and comparing the raw output with the business needs that your company has.
Well, and you can roll forward in your mind, right, and assume that at some point the output of this advisor is going to be able to feed your machine learning capabilities.
Yes.
So you can put your own rules in, right? You might have some industry specific things. You might have some government regulation things that you want to be able to put rules in and say, hey, when you're going through advising me, ignore this thing because I did it for a reason. But what it does do is it equips your humans, right? It equips your people, your most valuable resource, to be able to make decisions about your computing resources. So,
well, and in closing, it's really an excellent point that you bring up, and that is the fact that it's not being fed into machine learning yet, but it will at some point. And those humans that are making decisions are going to need to up level to whatever that next thing is. There'll always be a need for them. It's just going to shift over time.
Absolutely.
Cool. We finished another one.
Man, we're through. This is like episode 2.
Plus our preview episode. Yeah. That's just fun.
That was for free. I mean, that's just basically great.
We gave it away.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, not like these.
No, we are charging for these, right? We are charging for these, right, Drew? Yeah.
Here's our charge. So we have a sponsor. Sponsor's a building that we're in, our employer basically, literally, and that is Rackspace Managed Hosting. So we make the cloud work. Doesn't matter which cloud it is. Could be Microsoft, could be AWS, could be somebody else's in the future. Who knows?
Could be.
But Rackspace is the #1 managed cloud provider, and we are glad to be here.
Yeah, we are.
All right, this was episode number 2, the top 10.5 things to do that provide great value inside of the Azure Portal. Yep. Watch for some specific, it's going to show up on the channel here eventually, just some little screencasts for each of these, just little nuggets we're gonna pepper out there for you to help understand how to do this stuff. So I'm Jeff DeVerter.
I'm Kent Kingery.
We are the Cloudists. We're glad you're here today.
Have a great day.